But here we will leave the story of John F. Horner and his heirs and go back to the line from which I descended. That was through his brother Richard, through Richard's son Alfred, the only son who married, then Alfred's only son, Howard. We left Howard a little way back. He had left the W.J. Hanchey home, lived for a year or two in the city, married Mary Jensen. Son Kenneth may have been born while they lived in the city, but it was not long after. They moved first and briefly to a rented farm on North Main Street, and then to the Bones farm. The buildings on that farm are on the east side of Lathrop Avenue, just south of the intersection with Chicory Road. This picture is of the house as it looked in the 1960s, not the way it looked when Howard and Mary lived there. But take away the fresh paint and the nice landscaping, and it's not hard to imagine it as it appeared when the Howard Horners moved in. In my lengthy autobiography on earlier DVDs, I have a segment about my Horner ancestry. Since I did that before the research for the story I tell here, some of it is wrong. Where it conflicts with this account, please disregard it. By the time of the census of 1920, the Howard Horner family has grown. There are 3 sons, Kenneth, Elmer, and Everett. Sister Miriam is a 1-year-old, and twin daughters Grace and Leon will complete the family in the July heat of 1921. The family are still renters on the Bones farm. Before the 1930 census, the Horners have bought their own place a half-mile south on the west side of Lathrop Avenue. The property consists of 60 or 80 acres, I don't remember quite which, and a Sears Roebuck 9-room mail-order farmhouse. Sears and Roebuck sold them by mail order, complete to the nails and the varnish. The model appears to be the Cornell. And you see similar farmhouses around the Midwest if you look carefully. I don't know if the house was there when Howard bought it or if he arranged for its construction. Howard tells the census taker the farm is worth $25,000 in 1920. And it will be the center of this branch of Horner family life for the next 50 years. That is, until after the death of Howard and his widow Mary later moves to a small house in the city. Their daughter Leon and her husband Vernon Nelson and their growing family will next occupy the homestead. I've skipped a few years and go back to the spring of 1923. Howard and Mary's son, Kenneth, is a 9th grader at Franklin Junior High. There's nothing wrong with his scholastic achievements, but he is not in tune with the academic world. His father has begun springtime field work, and Ken is restless, and Dad could use his help. One April day, 15-year-old Kenneth does not return to school, ever. He embarks on his lifetime career as a farmer, a vocation he pursues energetically, vigorously, single-mindedly, ambitiously, and aggressively for the next 53 years. It is his drive, tough-mindedness, and energy that is to make H.A. Horner & Sons the largest vegetable grower in Racine County during the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. Scores of youngsters from the city will get their first taste of hard physical labor in the Horner vegetable fields. They will work on the hard clay soils of the Hilker farm, and many will ride 20 miles in the farm trucks to the peat fields at Wind Lake. There will be a time when many residents of Racine will recall their days topping onions, sieving sets, weeding long rows, picking up potatoes. They will laugh and complain about the low wages, the dirt, the common dipper for drinking water, and the long hours. But they will also feel down deep a sense of pride in having earned money from their own honest labor. They will know what real work is, and many of them will become prominent figures in the Racine community. Perhaps the most famous of these was the entertainer Barbara McNair, and I was the Horner who was her immediate supervisor for the few days she did farm work in 1952. I have given my father Ken credit as the driving force in the Horner farming enterprises. I believe this to be a true statement. His father, Howard, filled an important role as promoter and front man. He knew many of the leaders in Racine. My Uncle Everett and I were competent managers and played important roles in the day-to-day operations, but it was my father, Ken, who pushed and demanded better, saw a bigger picture. His bent to find fault often gave me migraines, but it always kept Everett and I on our toes, also always careful to avoid mistakes, always looking for ways to do tasks better and cheaper. Elmer Eugene, the middle brother, has not been mentioned, although he was one of the original partners of H.A. Horner and Sons. Elmer had been the first of the family to move to the Wind Lake farm and to be on-site manager of the acreage Granddad had the audacity to purchase in the late 1930s. My father, Ken, always laughed about how he beat up on younger brother Elmer when they were growing up.
I fought a lot.
Did you? Yeah.
I pounded him.
And I think it's not impossible that underlying personality differences played a part in Elmer's decision to leave the family partnership. But Uncle Elmer also marched to a different drummer. Somehow to just take an easy way and follow the family path didn't work for him. He soon joined a different Church of the Nazarene, and in 1941 he packed up Alice, their then 4 children, and moved to the northern Wisconsin town of Mercer, summer home of the Capone brothers, Ralph and Al. Elmer started a seed potato growing operation. It was an enterprise doomed to failure, not for any fault of Elmer's. Mercer is not only north, it is 1,000 feet higher in elevation. It's just too cold in Mercer to consistently grow and successfully harvest potatoes. Farming is not a business where you can fail 2 years out of 5. Elmer's operation basically failed because of losing several harvests to field frost. He turned to other enterprises, which, although not wildly successful, permitted the family to hang on in northern Wisconsin for many years. February 27, 1948. My grandfather, Howard, succumbs to a stroke. He has friends and acquaintances seemingly everywhere. At 63 years of age, many contemporaries survive. Flowers overflow the crowded Central Church of the Nazarene on College Avenue in Racine. And here I am inserting a quote from the obituary of his great uncle, John Forrest Horner. I never heard Grandpa refer to this man, his great uncle. Doubt if he ever met him, but apparently they shared many qualities. I quote from that obituary of 1908, written 40 years before, that speaks volumes about the character of both men, and I quote, Mr. Horner was an honest and upright man in all his dealings, and had the respect of all who knew him, which was evidenced by the large attendance at the funeral. I think I will leave the narrative of our Horner ancestors here. We are close enough that most of you will be able to pick up the story from personal knowledge or the stories of your parents. I have gone on for far less good video. But as I pursued the facts, I have felt compelled to understand these folks who appear to us only as a series of events recorded by disinterested census enumerators and other record takers. We are not able to ask them the questions we would love to ask. There are few written family records, but it was my hope to put some flesh on the bones and blood in the veins of these ancestors of ours, to understand as much as possible the lives they led. I hope that in some small way I have done that for you.